Everyone, and welcome to episode 28 of Ora-Ora Live. I am here today with artist, curator, lecturer, researcher, scholar. You have so many titles, but I don't think he really needs a long-winded introduction from me, but Dr. Isaac Leung. Welcome, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
I really think for today, I'm not going to waste any time. We'll just jump into kind of the discussions, the questions we wanted to talk about today. So when you were in Chicago and studying for your Bachelor of Fine Arts, was your focus on painting as well, or?
Yeah, well, in the first year I did, but I was really a bad student. There is one course, which is the fundamental course about three-dimensional art. So all the students have to do an assignment, like using the same piece amount of wood, and then to make it functional. So and then in the first class, we were in the wood shop, and basically I can't make anything with my hands. So and then there is like a tour of the wood shop, and then there is like a middle, kind of Midwest kind of chubby man who's saying, "Haha, last semester there was somebody cut his finger here." So I got really scared, and then I was like, how the hell am I going to survive in this class? I have to make this functional without using any nails or anything. So so all my classmates were really into it, and so they spent all the time in the wood shop, and then spent 3 months of time to make the piece of wood becoming functional. And then I did nothing, of course. And then in the final critique, I showed the same piece amount of wood, and then I put it on the sink, and then put a soap on the piece of wood. And then I told the professor, okay, this piece of wood is functional
it's
now.
A soap dish, kind of.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then all the students were really kind of mad. I was quoting found objects and all these kind of theories.
Yes.
And then so half of the students were really mad, and you're just lazy, you're just you told me that you hate the wood shop at the beginning. And then there were another group of students was starting to be yelling and saying that I think Isaac is really criticizing our school's first year program. He's giving us an insight about how bad the assignment and the curriculum is. So I was standing there to see two groups of students arguing. And that really kind of gave me an inspiration as a starting point about what does art mean, and what does object means, and what is the contextual meaning of all these kind of objects, and how you kind of articulate your project in a way that could be different from other people from different kind of perspectives. So that kind of got me going, and then I completely dropped painting and the practice of painting, and then I finally go into video and media art, which I found super interesting. Particularly by then, I think video art was really a tool to kind of talk about political things, and it's something that's very instant, that you could actually use the camera to portray stories.
So you were the chairman of VideoTouch since 2013, which is a role that you've kept until just earlier this year.
Right.
During your tenure there, you initiated so many projects, lectures, exhibitions. You collaborated with a lot of large organizations like K11, Art Basel, Cock and Flat. What were your visions and goals while you were working there? And in your opinion, what changes do you think that you've made, or VideoTouch in general, for the Hong Kong community?
Yeah. So I think one of the things that was really challenging by that time was you are kind of organizing an organization which has a history. So one of the directions was for example, we had an archive, and then how we could actually use website, kind of all the search engine in order for people to actually understand the context in the past, which I think by that time in Hong Kong was 20 or 30 years ago. All these artists, all these experimental artists was really contributing to a landscape that is really relevant to the politics in that time, and also kind of like a foundation for the future organizational forms. So kind of like how to rearticulate all these data and how to put it in a system that people could search all these kind of contents. Was one of the main things, and the other thing was like I was kind of really wanted to experiment different models because I think in Hong Kong nonprofit organizations are highly kind of depending on public funding. There is certain kind of limit because the funding is quite limited. So how we can actually use these kind of limited resources and to experiment new models to kind of create impact. And I think one of the strategies was doing collaboration. I think that is really important. For example, we had a project called Both Sides Now, and every year we collaborate with a lot of UK organizations, and we had like residency program, multiple screenings, and also exhibitions. And you can't believe like we actually use like 30,000 Hong Kong dollars to do so many things every year. The thing is like we were trying to think about this kind of sharing economy concept. If we have like 20 partners from all over the world and each of us have $30,000, can we make a project sustainable?
Right.
How we could actually bring video art to different contexts. For example, collaborating with Clock and Flap, you get a whole bunch of audiences that would never go to see a show. I think like the art world is quite kind of still quite kind of confined to a certain number of people, and how we can actually bring that out of the comfort zone and create new contexts was really important.
Right. You mentioned, for example, like collaborating with Clock and Flap, and obviously more people knew more what Videotage was doing, the artists, curators. Did you actually see effect after doing these larger scale shows?
Yeah. One of the example was like we did a show at K11 called Life Alike, and we got like a lot of number of like young people to come over, and which I actually learned a lot. For example, when you see the comments, how kind of like the content goes to different dimensions, is like you see the kids like快啲嚟啦，聽日咁樣，and then like suddenly there will be like 50 other kids coming over to see the show. So I got to learn about how we portray stories of art on social media, how you could actually create languages that is relevant to these kids. So after the show, we actually did focus group to a lot of audiences who actually tagged the show, and also gave comments, and I found it really highly amazing. Like I got to learn about why do these audiences they come to see the show, which they actually some of the audiences never seen any exhibition in their life before.
It's the first time.
So and then I invited one of the audiences who never go to see the show, and then like he actually went to see this show 5 times. Like the first time he was like, oh, I just want to take some selfies. And then like the second time, starting from the second time, he was like, oh, I really want to learn about these art. So in the second episode of that exhibition, I invited that audience to be, an art critic and a reporter to interview the artist, and have live streaming of ordinary person, an audience, and he wrote about this artwork, and he participated in the curation of like the second episode of the show. And he during the whole process, I found it really highly amazing, because it's kind of like a co-creation kind of a meaning process that is not just the curator is like, dominating or authorizing certain kind of art. What does that mean? But it's actually, an ordinary person through a process to learn about that and then giving, his perspective in the show. So it's just really amazing. It's much more meaningful than any other projects because I got to learn about what they are thinking, which I think this is like really 21st century idea. You see, this. I think one of the amazing cases was in San Francisco, the museum where somebody put a pair of glasses on the floor, and then it becoming like, the audience could be the curator. I mean, they are creating another context in that exhibition space and have their own audience, in the online social media realm. I was very interested in that kind of dynamic between audience and also what you're presenting, and how exhibition becoming kind of like a platform, rather than just, traditionally it's like just a space for showing up, or, I have the authority, you are the person who is learning. So I think that kind of like interactivity is really important. Yeah.
Besides this project, I know that you've curated a lot of large-scale projects, and one that does come to mind was, I believe, in 2019, which is a project called Artificial Landscape, which was basically right outside Sogo in Causeway Bay, the big billboard where we usually see ads. It's a very iconic landmark in Hong Kong, right? That Causeway Bay crossing. It's like the Shibuya crossing of Tokyo, but here in Hong Kong. Of course, the concept of displaying artwork on a large screen, it's not new. But what did you think this project achieved?
Right. I think that was like another really amazing project, was like you got to disrupt that kind of landscape in Hong Kong that is highly constructed by consumerism. We purposely chose artwork that are so like monotonic and really slow, and which is kind of like a disruption to that kind of landscape. I think like it's quite interesting to see audience sometimes they just look at the screen and what is going on. It's like it's not it's not a handbag, it's not a cosmetic advertisement anymore. And one of the works was Howard Chang's work, and his work was really kind of mimicking a security camera. So audience started to like look at the screen. It's like, am I on the screen? And that kind of notion is becoming, the screen is not just a one-way kind of linear thing of I am telling you, you have to buy this, or you have to, model on this, that this is your lifestyle, but rather becoming kind of like an interface that really connects the audience and the space and the kind of neighborhood, and also, the screen itself. I think a lot of people think about media art as something it's always so difficult to understand, or it has to be, really expensive installation or things like that. But I think like, one of the strategy was how we could actually use so little money, but by collaboration, using other already existing technologies in order to shape an art project, was something that I was really trying to do.
It's good to know that there is that sense of awareness, like you mentioned with the previous work with the security camera. People realized, hey, am I on the screen? We're surrounded by screens, and sometimes it seems like it's a very kind of effortless kind of scroll, and you're just not really even absorbing any of the information that you see.
Some of the audience were really attracted by the images, and they want to know, what's going on. But the other thing I found it quite interesting is about, how information is like, kind of inspiring and other person to do certain kind of actions. What I mean is like, when you see an audience like standing there and starting to stand there still and look at the screen and starting to take picture, and there would be like 5 more people, because of that person is shooting the screen, they would be standing there and then to look at the screen and starting to take pictures. So I think like, this kind of phenomenon is quite interesting about like how, things get viral. A lot of time is because of the peer kind of influence. If there is like one person starting to do it and there's another person starting to do that, and there would be like 50 more people starting to do that. So it's really depending on whether the first 2 person is really starting to do some kind of action. So it's kind of also mimicking the online world,
Right.
like in social media world, how things get viral, how things get spread out. A lot of time is really depending on the first few people, and they are actually the leader instead of the curator. Another thing is like, not just from the audience number, is I think the kind of publicness idea is quite important in Hong Kong. Because public space is like quite controlled by framed by the kind of economy, framed by a lot of these kind of politics. But how individuals or ordinary people could actually involve in public space through art. They kind of really a form that is like has the kind of poeticness is quite important. So one of the things that I found it really interesting was like how the project could somehow create a certain kind of publicness. For example, destabilizing the kind of hegemony or discourses of consumerism.
Do you think the audience realized what they were looking at?
Some of the audience actually don't know, which I think it really doesn't matter. I think like the same as having a show in a shopping mall. A lot of people would be criticizing, oh, so the audience just come over to take selfies or blah blah blah. Of course, some of the audience they go deeper, right? But I think it's all about experience, and I think like the idea of curating a project or the power of art is to really finding a way to disrupt the kind of conventions of our everyday life. So what I mean is like for example, if you are a person living in Hong Kong and all of your life is like you are surrounded by, oh, I have to go to shopping mall every day, and the reason why I need to go to the reason why I need to work is because I need to go to shopping mall. So I need to get a better job in order to get a more expensive brand handbag, right? So this is our life, and if you have a project to kind of destabilize that for I don't know, for 15 minutes in a shopping mall while I'm shopping the bag, but I pass by that exhibition. It's like so weird, and this exhibition is like so subversive, or like or simply just like cryptic. I don't understand it. That 15-minute experience is so important because it gets you a starting point to think about your life is more than just a handbag, right? And you don't need to actually everybody to be a scholar or to be an art critic or to learn exactly what museum or curator want you to know about the artwork, but that experience itself is so valuable, particularly in a city like in Hong Kong, because we are already framed by so many things that are so expectable, and that machine is running so well. And I think art plays a role in kind of disrupting our conventions of everyday life.
You talk a lot about curating and storytelling, and it's been such an interesting year with COVID-19, the pandemic. We're observing kind of how people have been responding, how the art industry has been reacting and also adapting. Especially when we talk about art, I think a huge appeal of it is kind of that physical quality of it, where you're interacting with the artwork, the artist, and through the audience. We're gradually moving online, we in terms of galleries, art fairs, institutions as well, to adapt to kind of this current digital market. Do you think this relationship will change, or how can we kind of sustain this relationship and how it evolves?
I think like according to the technologies we have right now, we are far away from being totally virtual. There's a long way to go. We still need space, particularly in an art world. Like the value of art is so much constructed by activities in space. Like we talked about last time, I think like it's always like fascinating to think about why people would be queuing up for 2 hours for Louvre Museum, and then like they would standing crowd of people to take pictures of Mona Lisa, and this is a social activity, and those kind of social activities are the key element to construct values of art. I mean, people could actually just buy an art book of Mona Lisa or download a JPEG, which is so much better than you using your phone to take a picture of Mona Lisa, right? But why people are still doing that is because of, you know, spatial activities really authorize like meaning for people, you know, concerning artworks. So it works in galleries, it works in museum, it works in like a lot of contexts, exhibiting the work in a space where people could actually have a platform, have a space to interact. Is something quite important. I mean, like you guys do Galerie, and you would totally know how a space would providing a platform for you to sell certain kind of artwork. And before asking somebody to buy an artwork, probably you need to spend hours in a space to socializing and things like that, right? So, you know, I think it's still really relevant space, and it's and that is also why the art world is like quite kind of having a huge challenge after COVID-19, because basically all these mechanisms of creating value, all these tools are suddenly gone. That like we don't have that anymore, right? So I think that you know in the foreseeable future, I think like space is like, you know, still play a really important role.
The virtual space is also a social space. So do you think that elements of this we will be able to mimic digitally?
Right.
You were talking about, I just want to see the artwork in a space. If we were to mimic that digitally and you still have that experience, the conversation continues, right?
Yeah,
you can have a conversation with someone through other means.
Right.
Do you think it will be very different?
Well, I think there are two levels. First is like, you know, I think current technology, we still like cannot, like, I mean, maybe in 10 years it would be different that like, you know, I put on a goggle and then I could actually feel the artwork. I can actually feel you are talking to me, right? It's like in terms of sensitivity, I think technologies is not there yet. That's why I think, you know, it goes to all the disciplines and areas in the world, even commercial entities, you know, people are highly affected by COVID-19, right? On the other level, I think the art world is quite kind of behind in terms of social media. It's like suddenly people are doing all these kind of online activities, creating, you know, so-called virtual galleries and things like that, which I think, like, you know, compared to the commercial world or other sectors, you know, we are, you know, quite kind of highly not successful in the way of creating that kind of engagement. I think a lot of us are still kind of using a very traditional way of, you know, using social media, and how we could actually create that kind of relevance for engagement is quite important, right? I think, like, you know, I have something to show that, like, for example, I think like this is NASA's IG, which I found it really amazing. This is like a 15-year-old girl from Russia was saying, you know, I really want to be an astronaut, but I don't speak English. So I really want to learn English because I want to get a grant from NASA. And NASA would actually reply these kids, like, you know how they are imagining, you know, the space. I think, like, you know, these kind of things are really touching. That's kind of like a very humanistic approach of engaging audience. So I think one of the successful thing that NASA does is like really putting something so abstract. And the thing that I think they are very successful is the way that they are even more abstract than art, because it's something that you could never see, you could never touch, right? But then they create an imagination by using storytelling online, and by creating different contents of having a very, because the space is so far away and so cold, and how you could actually create a content that have a humanistic approach. For example, you know, videos spoken by an astronaut about the stories, and that could create some imaginations for the kids and for the general public. So if you see the number of people that are following NASA is like 100 times more than, you know, museums or, you know, the most top-notch museums. And for such a niche you know, topic, and for such an institution with basically so limited funding, particularly if you think about the budget for NASA has been cut down
Yes.
a lot in the past years. So they need, and they need kind of like use that as an impetus for them to really reinvent itself, to create a public discourse.
Right.
So I think the art world should really learn about these kind of things. Yeah. I think another example was like the Cowboy Museum. Like that museum, because of COVID-19, so
Right.
the security guard became the social media in charge. So he started to make social media talking about artwork and objects in the museum. And within a week, he got like the museum got like 300,000 followers. And I think this is like something quite interesting. Is like I think as an art practitioners, we really need to think about like how to use that tool to create a kind of relevance to audience, and to give them certain kind of context to imagine why these artwork are meaningful to us. So also think about like what is the difference between putting an artwork in a museum and on an IG. It's a very interesting question to think about. I think most art institutions still using the language that are highly kind of cryptic. And like I keep on saying storytelling. I think like there's an object, like an object could be, you have thousands way of portraying that. You portray an art object in kind of like a spatial setting, right? But then like in social media, like that kind of flatness, it's really about how you put it into language, put it into a context for these audience to get into the artwork. So I think those are quite important. Like for example, again, like NASA used a lot of different campaigns, video of astronauts, and also something really kind of like behind the scene things. And they also create a campaign which is like asking kids to design toilet for the spaceship.
Right.
And those kind of things are I think those are part of the storytelling process. Ultimately, what you want to do is to educate the public, right?
Right.
And to get them interested. But like, how you, instead of writing an artist statement and putting the artwork on an IG and put, 3,000 word artist statement there, or using, languages that are, that they don't understand.
Right.
How you could actually create different kind of context to look at one thing. Is quite important. And also interactions, how you could actually respond to these kind of comments, and you could actually easily make a story with a 15-year-old girl like in NASA, and create a touching stories of helping a girl in Russia to do that, right? To interested in space. But
And
in
it'll go
art
viral.
world, like how we could do that is quite
I think you mentioned a really good point in terms of educating the public about art, not using the language that we're used to, because we're within the industry. How do we appeal to other people who might not have that same level of knowledge or interest? How do you think art institutions, or just institutions in general, how can we kind of cater our strategies to involve them, to pique their interest, to allow this education process to continue growing?
You create other kind of methods or like platforms to allow them to speak, to allow them to participate in a curatorial process, to really realize like the kind of publicness of museum. In contrast to museum is quite kind of like hierarchical. Basically the art world, the whole art world, the model is quite hierarchical. It's controlled by basically 0.1% of people that telling you what is valuable culturally and economically, right? So that kind of mentality of valuing individuals, particularly young people's thought, is quite important, I think. I don't have a kind of like a master plan for that, but I could just think about that experience. It's something I found like in my whole career was like one of the most kind of touching experience to get to know audience and give them power to, and they might actually do something different from you. and that would actually eventually intervene what you are practicing.
But I think this year, this pandemic year, has taught us something very valuable, which is to spend some time to listen to other people.
Yeah.
And that's what we were trying to do with Ora-Ora Live.
Yeah.
And it's very important. Yeah, this has been the year about change. This pandemic definitely has been a catalyst for so many different things, whether it be new strategy, just thinking outside of the box. Is there a change that you look forward to for the art industry for the future?
Sometimes you just have to believe, like this is, believe the students and younger generation, because I think a lot of times they do a lot better than you in terms of using those tools. And for me, I don't think I could do that. I'm like, already too old to do that. Like, I think like sometimes like, you see opportunities too, and you just need to, give the younger generation more opportunities. I don't know, maybe like for next time you could ask an audience, a 13-year-old kid to do an interview with, I don't know, with an auction house director. Could be quite
very
interesting.
I think so.
Because I think that interaction would be, a completely different experience from the rhetoric of the art world. Again, I'm already too old to get rid of all those languages and things. But I believe the new generation, they have the power, and you just need to give them, just let them try and let them involve in a process of what you are doing. And I think that is very important.